I made my lazy coworker accidentally fired. Pro-revenge. The fluorescent lights hummed above my head, a soundtrack to the slow-motion train wreck that was my professional life. I liked my job, I really did. Building cloud-based solutions for hospitals, helping doctors access records faster, streamlining patient care, it felt important. Until I had to actually work with Chad. Chad was something else. A master of appearing busy while accomplishing absolutely nothing. He'd stroll in around 10 a.m., freshly showered and radiating the faint scent of Axe body spray, spend an hour chatting about last night's whatever sports game, and then settle in for a solid 3 hours of, I honestly never figured out what. He was always typing, furiously sometimes, but the resulting code was always a disaster. Buggy, inefficient, and usually completely missing the point of the task. My first few weeks, I tried to be helpful. I figured he was just getting up to speed. I patiently explained the intricacies of our codebase, offered suggestions for improvement, even stayed late a few times to help him debug his messes. But it quickly became clear that Chad wasn't interested in learning. He was interested in looking good. "Hey, Mark, appreciate you covering for me yesterday," he'd say, slapping me on the back with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Had a family emergency. Totally saved my bacon. Family emergency. Right, I saw his Instagram. He was at a brewery posting pictures of hazy IPAs. It wasn't just the laziness. It was the audacity. He'd happily take credit for anything that went right, and just as quickly deflect blame when things went south. At one team meeting, he presented a feature I'd practically built from scratch as his own brilliant idea. Sarah, our manager, ate it up. Sarah, God bless her, she meant well. But she was completely incapable of confronting anyone, especially Chad. He had her wrapped around his little finger. He'd charm her with compliments, agree enthusiastically with her ideas, even the bad ones, and generally make her feel like she was the best manager in the world. In return, she gave him a free pass on everything. I tried talking to her. "Sarah, Chad's code is constantly causing problems. It's impacting our deadlines, and it's creating a lot of extra work for the rest of the team." She'd nod sympathetically. "I know, Mark, I've noticed. But you know Chad's really trying. He's still learning, and he's such a positive influence on the team. We don't want to discourage him, right? Discourage him. He needed a cattle prod, not encouragement." That's when the resentment started to simmer. It was a slow burn at first, a low-grade annoyance. But it grew day by day, fueled by late nights, debugging sessions, and the constant knowledge that Chad was out there, living his best life, while I was picking up his slack. Then Emily joined the team, fresh out of college, bright-eyed and eager to make a good impression. She was assigned to work with Chad on a relatively simple task, updating the user interface for a patient registration form. I watched with a growing sense of dread as the familiar pattern unfolded. Chad would give Emily vague instructions, disappear for hours, and then reappear at the last minute to claim credit for her work. One afternoon, I found Emily near tears in the break room. "I don't understand," she whispered. "He keeps telling me I'm doing a great job, but then the code doesn't work and he blames me. That was it." That was my breaking point. Seeing Emily, so enthusiastic and talented, being crushed by Chad's incompetence, it was too much. I couldn't stand by and watch it happen. I sought out David. David was the senior engineer on our team, practically a living legend. He'd been at the company for 15 years, seen it all, and had developed a healthy dose of cynicism as a result. "David," I said, cornering him by the coffee machine, "I don't know what to do. Chad is completely incompetent, Sarah won't do anything about it, and it's impacting everyone's work." David sighed, took a long sip of his coffee, and looked at me with weary eyes. "Welcome to corporate America, kid. Look, you could go to HR, but trust me, it won't do any good. They'll just shuffle papers around and tell you to work it out with Chad. So what am I supposed to do? Just keep fixing his mistakes and letting him take credit?" "No," David said, a glint of something almost like amusement in his eye. "You're going to play the game. You're going to let him hang himself." He explained his philosophy. Direct confrontation was risky. It could backfire, make you look like the problem, and give Chad ammunition to play the victim. The key was to be subtle, to plant seeds of doubt, to let Chad's incompetence become undeniable. "Document everything," David advised. "Every bug, every missed deadline, every time you have to clean up his mess. But don't send it to Sarah. Send it to Rajesh in QA. He already hates Chad's guts." And so I started documenting. I meticulously tracked every bug I found in Chad's code, every deadline he missed, every instance where he misrepresented his work. I didn't directly blame Chad in my reports. Instead, I focused on the technical details, the root causes of the problems. I made sure Rajesh was copied on every email, every bug report, every code review. Rajesh was a godsend. He had been complaining about Chad's poor code for months, but Sarah had always dismissed his concerns. Now, armed with my meticulously documented evidence, he went to war. He started tracking the number of bugs per line of code, comparing Chad's metrics to the rest of the team. The results were staggering. Chad's code had 10 times more bugs per line than the average. Meanwhile, I started subtly undermining Chad's credibility in team meetings. When he presented his brilliant ideas, I would ask gentle, probing questions that exposed his lack of understanding. That's a great concept, Chad, I'd say, but how would that integrate with the existing API? And what about scalability? Have you considered the performance implications? Emily, inspired by my actions, also began asking Chad questions, innocently and enthusiastically. Chad, I was wondering, how does this function handle error conditions? I couldn't quite figure it out from the documentation. Chad would stammer, sweat, and generally make a fool of himself. Sarah, bless her heart, seemed oblivious to the subtle power dynamics at play. She just thought we were all being collaborative and helpful. Then came the new client, a huge healthcare provider signing a multi-million-dollar contract. This was a game changer for the company. Everyone was excited, energized, and determined to deliver a flawless product. Of course, Chad was assigned a key role. He was responsible for developing a critical module that handled patient data encryption. Sarah, for reasons that defied all logic, seemed to have complete faith in him. Chad has such a knack for security, she said at one team meeting. I know he's going to do a fantastic job. I exchanged a knowing glance with David. We both knew what was coming. The project kicked off and the pressure mounted. Chad, predictably, started slacking off. He spent most of his time in meetings, talking about his vision for the module, while neglecting the actual coding. I saw Emily trying to help him, but he dismissed her suggestions and continued to produce garbage code. Rajesh and his QA team were working overtime, trying to keep up with the flood of bugs. They were finding critical vulnerabilities, security flaws that could expose sensitive patient data. Rajesh raised the alarm repeatedly, but Sarah continued to downplay the severity of the issues. We're still early in the development cycle, she'd say. Bugs are to be expected. I'm sure Chad will iron them out. I knew we were headed for disaster. I could see it coming like a slow-motion car crash, but there was nothing I could do. I had planted the seeds, laid the groundwork, but the final act was out of my hands. The day of the demo arrived. Mr. Thompson, the VP of Engineering, was in attendance, along with several executives from the new client. The atmosphere was tense but optimistic. Everyone was confident that we were going to knock their socks off. Chad took the stage. He launched the application, navigated to the patient registration form, and nothing. The system froze. A spinning wheel appeared on the screen. Silence. Chad started sweating profusely. He clicked frantically, trying to get the system to respond. Nothing. He stammered. I think we're experiencing a slight technical difficulty. Mr. Thompson's face turned a shade of purple I didn't think was humanly possible. He glared at Chad with pure, unadulterated rage. Get it fixed, he growled. Now. The entire team scrambled to figure out what was going on. I knew instinctively that it was Chad's encryption module. I had seen the code, I knew the vulnerabilities, I knew the shortcuts he had taken. Working furiously, I was able to identify the root cause. A buffer overflow caused by a poorly validated input field. Chad had neglected to sanitize the data, allowing a malicious user to inject arbitrary code into the system. I implemented a temporary fix, bypassing Chad's flawed encryption module and restoring basic functionality. The demo was salvaged, but the damage was done. The client executives looked unimpressed. Mr. Thompson looked like he wanted to murder someone. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Mr. Thompson launched a full-scale investigation. Brenda from HR interviewed everyone involved, including me, Chad, Sarah, Rajesh, and Emily. I told the truth without explicitly blaming Chad. I described the technical challenges of the project, the difficulties I had encountered, and the steps I had taken to mitigate the risks. I made sure to highlight the critical vulnerabilities that had been discovered by Rajesh and his QA team. The investigation revealed a clear pattern of negligence on Chad's part. His code was riddled with errors. He had ignored warnings from the QA team, and he had failed to follow basic security protocols. It also revealed Sarah's failure to adequately supervise him. A week later, Chad was fired. He was escorted out of the building by security, carrying a cardboard box filled with his personal belongings. He didn't even look at me. Sarah was reprimanded and placed on a performance improvement plan. She looked defeated, her usual cheerfulness replaced by a weary resignation. Walking past her office, I saw her slumped at her desk, staring blankly at the wall. I felt a pang of guilt. I hadn't set out to hurt her, but I knew that my actions had contributed to her downfall. David found me staring out the window. "Well, kid," he said, clapping me on the shoulder, "you did it. You got rid of him." "Yeah," I said, but I didn't feel the sense of triumph I had expected. I guess I did. The office felt different without Chad. Quieter, more focused, less smelly. The team morale improved. We started shipping better code, meeting our deadlines, and generally being more productive. But something had changed in me too. I had seen the dark side of corporate politics, the backstabbing, the manipulation, the willingness to sacrifice individuals for the sake of the bottom line. I realized that the company's problems went deeper than just Chad and Sarah. The lack of accountability, the emphasis on superficial harmony, had created a breeding ground for incompetence. I started updating my resume. I quietly explored other job opportunities, looking for a company with a more ethical culture, a place where competence was valued and hard work was rewarded. One evening, I was scrolling through job boards and I came across a position at a small startup in Portland, Oregon. They were looking for a cloud engineer with experience in healthcare technology. The description sounded interesting, the company seemed promising, and the location. Well, I'd always wanted to visit the Pacific Northwest. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked the Apply Now button. The fluorescent lights still hummed above my head. But now they sounded different, less like a soundtrack to a train wreck, more like a beckoning.